I've discussed my affinity for analog horror in my previous video, and wanted to share a few of the miscellaneous horrors that have plagued me at various points in my early film viewing journey. I believe my initial aversion to the occult, mystical, supernatural, and unexplainable shaped much of my current interests in cinema today. Much of what we find horrific is rooted in the memory of media itself, often aided by the external mode of perception. Our inner psyches are prey to repetition through absurd revelation, reminiscent of dreams or lived experience, forcing us to peer inward. Picking a harrowing moment from David Lynch's filmography is simple. The close-up of the monkey in Fire Walk With Me, Episode 8 of Twin Peaks The Return, or the Winky's diner scene in Mulholland Drive are accompanied by their own set of theories. However, this specific scene of Laura Dern in Inland Empire has never been able to escape my mind. Perhaps the pinnacle of imperceptibility in Lynch's filmography, this brief encounter of a comically distorted version of Dern's close-up obliterates our phenomenological framework, decoupling itself from sensory function. The surreal is rendered digital, manifesting in the abstract narrative and disjointed plot structure. To me, Inland Empire exists in the transitory state between slumber and awakening, where half-rendered versions of reality aim to disorient. The moment in which the jump scare occurs feels oxymoronic. It's somehow perfect, yet entirely out of place, and I can't quite articulate why. Lynch manages to distort the ordinary through his unique brand of surrealism, where a reverse anthropomorphic transformation takes place. This manifests itself through a physical transformation that accompanies a character. The simple distortion of Nikki/Sue disassociates her stream of consciousness, resulting in a humanoid form that retains its presence. This motif often arises in Lynch's work. An idea as simple as the bug that plagues Sarah Palmer in Twin Peaks gives us just enough coherence to piece together her watching the same scene on television over and over, as well as that scene at the bar. These visual tricks are made effective through a singular, simple, yet jarring idea. What if the face you wear is not your own? While we're on the topic of jump scares, the most visceral reaction I've ever had to one is from Jaws. It remains my favorite Spielberg film to this day. In an atmosphere riddled with thalassophobic triggers, Hooper's discovery of Ben Gardner's body is a prime example of using your attention against you, arming your perceptiveness. We predict that the shark may lie beyond the murkiness of the deep sea, only to be greeted with a cruel twist of fate. A textbook example of what mastery of the narrative cinematic lexicon can do, Jaws remains unparalleled in its resourceful creativity. You have to love the days of old where the MPAA writing criteria gave this an easy PG. Another day's work is finished for the committee. The Shining will forever remain a puzzle box without a key, assuming an optical illusion-like structure that is indecipherable to its core. While author Stephen King's disdain for the film will ring true to literary purists, Kubrick's obsessive-compulsive nature manifests at its best on screen and worst in terms of production ethics. The result is symbolism galore, as audible and visual cues lead the audience to form individualistic pattern recognition. Results to uncover the grand conspiracy continue to foment postmodern attempts at explaining the ever-elusive grand narrative. See Akiva Saunders and John Fell Ryan's 2011 visual thought experiment in Synchrony, The Shining, Forwards and Backwards, as an example of how authorial intent becomes so ingrained into audience interaction. This is post-structural film at its most playful, and can come off as pretentious rambling to those who take it beyond the surface level or a necessary reading into the textual structure of the visual schemata. From a personal standpoint, the intrigue and horror of The Shining presents itself through a metaphorical framework. Much of this is attributed to the genius of the undisputed queen of Moogsploitation, Wendy Carlos. Carlos's soundtrack is at the heart of the film's most unnerving moment for me, the animal suit close-up. As Wendy Torrance ascends the stairs, a person in a suit is seen performing a sexual act on an unknown patron of the hotel. As expected, no objectivity is provided through textual analysis here. We can't even confirm what the canonical animal being portrayed is: dog, like in King's novel, or bear. Theorizing about whether this is Wendy's realization of the enduring abuse that Danny goes through, or prompting a mother's reluctant confrontation with the hotel's evil, each of these hold ample relevance. The zoom and music exacerbate the unwilling form of scopophilia the audience indulges in, serving as the ultimate plateau into darkness. Leyland Kirby's nearly 7-hour project, Everywhere at the End of Time, is often cited as his magnum opus. One of the key records responsible for ushering the hauntology genre toward the digital age, easy-listening recordings are sampled into oblivion, altered beyond their origin. The first project under his alias, The Caretaker, is directly inspired by The Shining's identity. sharing many similarities with Carlos's discography. Released in 1999, Selected Memories from the Haunted Ballroom directly samples ballroom music to conjure the effect of being inside the Overlook Hotel. The longer you listen, the more everything turns to ruin. What I've uncovered through the audible identity of The Shining remains the only interpretation set in stone for me. The contradictions we run into trying to rationalize our fears are inherently reductive. Speaking of Jack Nicholson, the childhood horror associated with him started before I had even heard of The Shining. I was a few years old and saw this framed portrait of him on the wall of a BJ's restaurant, prompting me to freak out. It was only a few months ago that I bothered to look up the photo. The attribution belongs to a photographer, Herb Ritz, who took it in 1986. Nicholson's status as an arbiter of the now patented, memified Kubrick stare is a testament to his range. Compare his performance in The Shining to his work in Antonioni's The Passenger. It'll serve as another reason to reject typecasting. Horror isn't the first word that springs to mind when discussing the legendary Shaw Brothers studio. While I've watched a good amount of films in the catalog from a young age, the spines and titles of many have forever remained ingrained in my memory, despite their unseen status. Luckily, I was introduced to the unbridled depravity of The Boxer's Omen and Human Lanterns rather recently in comparison, but darker titles spearheaded by the great Chen Kuan-tai, such as Killer Constable and The Tea House, still are indicative of the tonal shifts often at play with their filmography. The creepiest cover to this day remains Bat Without Wings, with imagery funnily reminiscent of Kiss's Gene Simmons. Yuen Woo-ping's Dreadnought features the same kind of supernatural costuming and theatrical makeup, adding to an already memorable martial arts experience. My reverence for Jane Schoenbrunn as a filmmaker arose through their debut narrative feature, We're All Going to the World's Fair. It's my favorite depiction of the internet in any piece of media, and it captures the liminal feeling of stumbling upon something you shouldn't have, but no one is there to talk with you about it. The presence of the titular ARG, alternate reality game, reminded me of how myth-making is, first and foremost, a collaborative act. The creepypasta Ben Drowned and its subsequent ARG are reliant on the fear of lost media, and are diegetically created through the reimagining of themes inherent in the work. If you were chronically online throughout the 21st century, chances are you came across the Ben.wmw file series, where the player interacts with the broken Majora's Mask game cartridge. Character models behave in increasingly erratic and strange ways. Harkening back to The Shining, forwards and backwards, I stand firm in my belief that video games should not be categorized among the traditional forms of art and use interactivity as a primary method of containment, in which players become artists through the antithetical act of not playing according to a set narrative. In this regard, code that functions properly in a controlled environment can be relinquished upon the act of jailbreaking or hacking, often resulting in a mathematical mishmash of uncertainty. Those familiar with the story of Majora's Mask will agree with me on the existential eeriness contained within the narrative. Link inhabits an alternate world where the moon is set to collide with it in 3 days. The moon also bears a striking resemblance to Mr. Melancholy, the main antagonist of Schoenbrunn's I Saw the TV Glow. As the viewer watches the unknown player traverse through the game, a smiling statuette version of Link consistently appears. The design honestly looks like a harmless me, but the level of realism in facial details seem one step removed from a character you'd find in the Tomodachi Life universe. The liminal cubic design of the game becomes labyrinthian in openness. Link burns and crumbles to the ground in flames. The phrase, "you shouldn't have done that," repeats continuously across the screen. Every NPC is rendered uncanny. Each glitch strips 3D elements of their humanity. The nearly 50-minute compilation of gameplay consists of these oddities. No rhyme or reason is found. The only movie that I actively remember giving me nightmares as a child is the 1953 adaptation of H.G. Wells' The War of the Worlds. I watched Steven Spielberg's version just a few years ago, yet the alien ship design in Haskins' film remains the creepiest. There's an uncanny quality to the Martian spacecrafts, for they remain still when being attacked. The Death Ray superweapon is at its most literal here, rendering anything it touches into a singular solid color. Deceptively simple in their design, the overall existential threat that the Martians pose and ultimately reveal about humanity is as straightforward as their appearance. If humanity's failure to work together isn't enough to stop an alien threat, what will? This thought is fascinating, and the presence of religion in the film, albeit straightforward, takes a stance contrary to Wells' original rendition. The divine represents a simultaneous saving grace and warning to the audience, assuaging the grand reckoning, an everlasting, overarching ticking time bomb. Nature cannot save us if we destroy it. While writing this video, I've noticed all my old fears, with the exception of the last one mentioned, are all related to the framing of singular faces. Our intrigue with the human subject in narrative film is privy to our internal fears. Early film theorist Bela Balazs writes this in The Close-Up. On the stage, the living, speaking human being has a far greater significance than dumb objects. They are not on the same plane, and their intensity is different. In the silent film, both human and object were equally pictures, photographs. Their homogeneous material was projected onto the same screen, in the same way as in a painting, where they are equally patches of color and equally parts in the same composition. In significance, intensity, and value, men and things were thus brought onto the same plane. Even in the talkie, the speaking human being is still only a picture, a photograph. The word does not lift him out of the community of the common material. For this reason, even the sound film still offers the possibility of a consistent style. For instance, a scurrilously grotesque, evil-faced personage may, like some hidden family trait, take on a resemblance to the scurrilously grotesque malevolence of the character. Or else objects surrounding a charming, smiling girl can all be smiling and graceful. I don't think I'll ever find the answers to these specific horrors, only the arbitrary connections that traverse my mind, and only our humanity can tell us why. I'd love to hear your film-related fears in the comments below. If you'd like to support my work, please leave a like on the video and consider subscribing to the channel. My Patreon is in the description for those who wish to fund future videos with their generosity. Thank you to my patrons, Joan, Jordan, and Joey. Thank you for watching. I truly appreciate it.